Hello and welcome to the Marketing Times Analytics Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Sofronas, and today we're on with Carlos Corredor. Carlos, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah. Thanks, Alex, for having me. I have worked in marketing and in particular in analytics for around 20 years. I started in the baseball industry. I'm from Venezuela. And then I moved to Chicago because I really enjoyed digital marketing, got a master's there, and worked in a couple of agencies. And then I started my agency, that was 8 years ago. And it's analytics is really the heart of everything that we do. But we are a cross-service digital marketing agency, particular for B2B. It's called Condor.
So tell us more about your agency and the specific services that you provide.
Yeah, so when we started, really out of coincidence, our first couple of clients were B2B and in particular tech services. So we built a lot of know-how there, and it's a different sport than, for example, direct to consumer, and in particular mid-market, right? So you have the long sales cycles, you have to live in the CRM, right? So we're really focused on B2B and lead generation clients. And we do really both demand generation, which can be paid media, SEO, now also GEO with AI. Paid media is really heavy on paid search, usually for mid-market, but that's evolving quickly and now includes, you have to really be good now at paid social as well, and eventually programmatic, including remarketing. Paid media is a big component, SEO, to generate demand. You can do cold email, that's saturated, but you could. And then on the marketing operations side, it's the website, and also very important that you have a clean and well-structured CRM and with enriched data, so then you can nurture the leads and the contacts that you're getting or that you're buying if you're buying lists, etc. So CRM management is also a big portion of that. Let's say what a lot of companies call or fall under the marketing operations function. And then obviously the website, whether it's creating landing pages or more full website refresh, that's also something that we do. So as you can see, it's a digital marketing in general. It's what you need to do nowadays in 2025 to grow and to drive leads and clients and revenue for your business.
Yeah, thank you for that overview. That's really informative, and it sounds like you cover a solid scope of the full scope of the marketing organization. I'm curious, you mentioned GEO or generative engine optimization. Can you tell us some best practices that you've identified?
Yeah, I think in general, obviously with ChatGPT and also the AI summaries of Google, a different nature of how people are finding out about brands. Google, if you think about it, is really like a yellow pages that they would send people to websites to find the answer, whereas ChatGPT is more of a concierge that gives you the answers himself. A lot of people are thinking it in terms of let's replace the traffic from Google with now traffic from LLMs. I'm not so sure it's going to be. I'm not so sure. Actually, in my opinion, that shouldn't be the goal, and I don't think the traffic will be completely replaced, at least not one-to-one. So I think now it's more about, first of all, it's more, you can do certain tactical changes, for example, schema markups and the structure of the content that you're putting out, right? But that will only get you so far. I think number one, you have to stop putting out so much top funnel content. That will be, for example, I don't know, pick a topic, let's say any industry. Alex, I'll give you an example of what I have in mind. What business,
Let's say coffee shops.
Coffee shops, okay. If you're going to ask the question of the different roasts in coffee, right? And I'm not an expert in coffee, but I understand it can be mild or strong, whatever, right? And that's a very top funnel, very educational. And a lot of coffee shops would then create content to position themselves there. And so when the people find the answer there, is people are not going to go to websites anymore for that type of question, right? They will find that answer in ChatGPT or in the AI summaries of Google. That's it. They're not. It's very educational, very top funnel. There's an answer that is the universal truth. So in top funnel education. So whereas if you start saying, okay, now if I'm a coffee shop in, for example, I live in Miami, so let's say South Florida coffee shops, right? Then there might be content around, okay, this is where the coffee shops in South Florida are importing coffees, or these are the partnerships that they have, right? It's, first of all, it's more original. It's not content that is there's a universal truth about it. And if you have proprietary data or unique content, or at least a unique point of view, so it's more of mid, bottom of the funnel, closer to the decision, right? So that's, I think, whether you're selling coffee or you're selling IT services or you're selling home services, you have to go further down the funnel. So that's another aspect. And finally, you need to diversify. You cannot solely depend on Google traffic anymore, right? Maybe LLMs will replace all of that traffic, and I'm wrong, but it's a big risk, right? So you have to diversify. You have to do digital PR. You have to do paid media, smartly, meaning targeted awareness, and not only bottom funnel Google, right? I think email is a little, again, saturated, but you need to be on top of your game in these other areas.
Before we continue, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this episode, SearchMaster. This is a tool that I actually created, and it has both traditional SEO analysis capabilities as well as GEO, or generative engine optimization analysis and optimization capabilities. So here's a quick overview of how the GEO analysis works in the SearchMaster app. So in this example, we're going to use Slack, and we will analyze the LLM visibility. So what this is going to do is ask three major AI tools, ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, about the competitors that Slack has and how each of them rank those competitors relative to Slack. We can see that overall Slack is ranking number 2 relative to its competitors, with Microsoft Teams generally being placed in the first position, and we can see all of the other competitors that the AIs consider to be in the same competitive set. We can also see why that's the case. So we can look at the strengths and weaknesses for each of the competitors, including the company Slack in this case, and we could see the differences that the AIs are picking up, and we can see that by AI tool. So we can see here Gemini is picking up some different strengths and different weaknesses for Microsoft Teams in comparison to Slack, and this can be used to optimize copy that is specifically geared towards LLM visibility. And at the bottom, we can also see for Google's Search AI, when you type in a question into Google and it gives you the AI overview, this will show when somebody types in Slack in their query in Google, these are the top websites that are cited for those searches. So that is a brief overview of how the Geo Analysis tab works in the SearchMaster app. And this entire app is totally free to use. There are paid tiers for higher usage limits, but you can absolutely use this tool for free forever. So you mentioned a focus around B2B, and it can be tricky to target specific personas in B2B because you need to engage the entire buying committee. You need both leadership and also people who would be ultimately consuming or using the product or software. And how do you approach making sure that you're targeting the right people to make sure you're engaging the full buying committee?
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I think the first thing is to be aware that there are multiple, let's call them personas, or levels of position, or even from different functions, right? So you have to start somewhere, and usually you have to talk to your sales team. You have to talk to the C-suite to say, okay, out of the clients that we have, who tends to make the decision? Because you have to start somewhere. Otherwise, you're going to be in the lab doing research forever, right? And let's say, okay, you know what? It's the CIO. That's the main person, right? Okay, you go with that either theory or initial truth, let's say, or your initial read of reality, and you say, okay, my number one persona, at least to start with, is going to be the CIO. Okay, who else, right? Who else participates? The managers are really important because they're doing the technical research, and they're the ones that are sending the CIOs. Okay, so let's say they're influencers, are the second most important persona, right? So managers of the IT team are the second one. And let's say if you don't have a persona framework established, I would advise just start with the first one. Start with the CIO. Right now, go one step further. Not only the CIO, which obviously the demographics, and you can find them on LinkedIn or Zoom for, but it's like, okay, what are really their problems? What are their goals? How are they being measured? And Now I'm going to create content for him. And if that's the only persona that you have, then your website is going to be for him and all of your content. Ideally, you will add a second or third persona, right? And depending on the importance, you would say, okay, half of the content that I'm putting out or the content piece are going to be for the CIO, 25% for the managers, and let's say that another person that I have found it's really important is this chief revenue officer, right? Maybe that's your third persona. Then okay, then I'm going to do 25% of the content for him, for example. But the website is going to be really directed to the CIO, and you establish it that way. At least you go with a plan, you try it out, and then you get a feedback from the sales team, especially from the sales team, and then you start shifting things. Maybe they say, what, the CIOs are not the ones visiting the website, so you can keep the CIO as a persona number one, but then the website you shift a little bit more, or maybe the homepage is for the CIO because it's a little more strategic and broad, but then the service pages or the solution pages that are a little more technical are for the manager, right? So you start making those adjustments, but really it starts with really defining who your target is, and then what type of content you're generating in what proportion to those personas.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how deep do you dive into the personas? What kinds of data would you want to gather for each persona that you're trying to influence?
Mm-hmm. The good thing is that's readily available, right? Because almost everybody has LinkedIn, and then there are other data platforms. For example, ZoomInfo is one of them, but the Apollo is one that is more entry level, and then there's 6sense that is a more enterprise that have all of that information, right? But the basics are your title. There are company information, right? So what is the industry of the company? What size is the company? What's the revenue? What's the number of employees? So that's really, because really you're going to target first a company, right? Then obviously you want to find the decision makers of the company. But let's say, okay, you define that for the company, and then it's really, okay, I want to, for example, I'm a marketing agency. Usually the ones that made the decision to hire me are the leaders of the marketing department. So in my case, I would go after, for example, I already said B2B, right? So I would look for all of the B2B companies in the US, for example, between a certain size. I'm not going for enterprise, but not too small. So in my case, let's say I'm going of companies that have between 10 million in revenue to 500 million in revenue per year. Okay, that will give me probably around, let's say, 10,000 companies. Okay, that's my group of companies. Okay, who am I going after there, right? I'm not going to go necessarily after the CEO. Okay, I'm going to go after people in the marketing function, right? So is there a CMO there? Yeah, probably companies that are closer to the 500 million already have a CMO. So CMO would be one. VP of marketing would be another one, right? So for me, and this is actual data from us, my number one persona is the VP of marketing, right? So that would be the VP of marketing in a company of those characteristics, right? And then you could have years of experience, but it's really, it comes down to that, right? Title and function are really the most important one. And that includes obviously level of position, right? A lot of times you can say, okay, not only VP, I'm glad to talk to a director. Manager, you have to say, okay, is that to junior, right? There's a lot of people that have a couple of years out of college and they have the title of manager, right? But maybe depending on what you're selling, if they are the ones making the decision, you need to incorporate them, right? But that's usually how it plays out with those factors. And then those are, let's say, the demographics. But then eventually you also have to start measuring the intent, right? Because maybe, let's say, managers are not very important at first, but if a manager, you know that he has engaged with your content, he's visited the website a couple of times, he's downloaded resources from the website, maybe it's worth to have a conversation with him because there's interest in your company, in your solution, right? So the theory is the demographics, but then the reality and in practice is, okay, are they engaging? And eventually, are they showing not only interest, but actually buying power? Do they have either the authority or influence in the authority? But that, again, those are things that you start finding out later as you start putting content in front of them and eventually having conversations with them.
Yeah, and how do you approach learning about the pain points or basically what to say to them? Because to basically inform the creative that you're placing in front of them, whether it's organic or paid.
Yeah, I think I like to keep it simple. I'm sure. So, for example, enterprise companies, they would do market research and they would spend thousands of dollars hiring a market research. Like usually mid-market companies, they don't have the luxury of doing that or the time. And honestly, I don't think it's even worth it. I think, for example, when I do it for my agency, I say, okay, what are really the pain points? And that can evolve, but you have to start somewhere, right? But it's really a good brainstorming sessions between the owners of the company and the head of sales and the head of product, perhaps. That should give you a starting point. And then you go with that in mind, you play with that, you follow that playbook, and then the sales guys might tell you, hey, out of the 10 conversations I had in the last month, the decision makers, all of them have asked me about, I don't know, in particular about our flexibility. Contract flexibility is more important for them. They don't want to commit for a full year. So then you say, okay, that's an advantage, right? That is a bigger, and if you, for example, again, going back to our case, right? We found that out that it's important, right? Some people don't want to commit to one service 1 year. I don't know what priorities we have, right? So you could decide, okay, I'm going to then talk about my flexibility as my number one differentiator, and not so much about pricing or not so much about the technology that is faster than the competition, but it's actually, hey, we get that priorities change and our contracts are flexible, and you can increase, or you start learning and you can pivot and adapt from what the sales folks are seeing or even your current customers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's plenty of intelligence from your current customers. That's, I think the sales team everybody listens to in general. They make sure that they are listened. Whereas your current customers, if you don't have a customer insights practice or person in charge of that's really valuable and insightful information to inform creative and positioning and differentiators that you can tap into.
How do you approach what messaging or audience to pay for ads to versus for like who to reach with organic? Is it sort of reach everybody with organic and then layer paid for specific audiences, or how do you approach that? What to pay for versus what to push organically?
Yeah, honestly, it's rare that we break down or that we create a difference, that way, right? Usually, if you say you're going after CAOs and that's their number one persona, then it needs to be an integrated approach, because a lot of times the content that you're going to put out for organic, you can slice and dice also for paid, right? It's usually the same, honestly, in that sense. I think, again, it's more important that it's an integrated, coordinated strategy, which you have to be realistic on how many personas you can go after and create content for, right? Because again, it's not only a couple of blog posts, you also have to because maybe you create a great, let's say, white paper, right? Or an in-depth blog post that is found by the CIOs, right? It's really well thought, it has great research, and it's for the CIOs, and then they see it. But then if you're remarketing via paid media to them, is all about content for the managers, they're gonna lose interest in your brand, right? So you want to make sure that, okay, first I'm gonna hit them with a white paper that's gonna come via organic, and the remarketing is going to either get details about that or at least talk about other problems that the CIO is facing, right? So I think that's more important than committing to one channel to one persona. There might be exceptions, I'm sure that it could be, and it could be well justified, but in general, honestly, I think it's more important to think in an integrated approach.
When you're doing targeting, do you tend to break campaigns down by competitor that the company might currently be on for switching type of campaigns? Or is it better to have a more broad reaching campaign across all companies, like all competitors that companies might be customers of?
You mean, so for example, if people are looking for a brand that is my competition, if I should, let's say, bid for that in paid search?
And if your messaging should be specific to the pain points that customer or that prospect might be having because of the competitor that you're using.
I think there's definitely a space for that. I think if it needs to be well thought out, because number one, those terms are really expensive. Everybody, that's a, let's say, well-known and mature strategy, and you're not going to be the only competitor bidding for those terms. And also, Google, not like they penalize you, but they want to show the brand first, right? Because again, if I'm searching for, I don't know, let's say I play tennis, right? So if I'm searching for Wilson rackets, I want Google to show me the Wilson link first, right? If they're going to put Babolat or Yonex or whatever, yeah, they're gonna get money out of it, but they balance that out, right? So they charge Wilson less for that number one position. So again, number one, you're gonna, but there are, if you're a disruptor with for a particular technology and it's proven and you have a great story and a very clear differentiator and a big advantage over that one in particular, then that it could work, right? But again, you cannot just start, okay, let's just do against all of the competitors. It could, but again, it's going to be very competitive, right? And it's going to be very expensive clicks that you're going to pay for. You have to make sure that you have a strong message to position yourself against whoever you are comparing to.
Yeah. And I think the benefit of those kinds of competitive campaigns would be that the clicks and journeys that you're capturing are purely incremental because you're breaking into journeys that you wouldn't have shown up in otherwise. And so I think that is a really big benefit of paid search in particular. And I'm curious how your clients react to things like that, where you can get them additional, like really strategic sales that are purely incremental through marketing that we're sure wouldn't have happened organically, but at a higher cost that kind of hurts efficiencies. Are clients typically receptive to that kind of message?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in general, yes. Doesn't I think all targeting, or what you really call prospecting, which is different when you pay for ads. Prospecting is people who haven't heard of you, and then remarketing is when they know you, that at least they have visited your site. But like really, the growth comes from prospecting. Now, the importance of prospecting. So, for example, competitive ads, as we talked about, that's a type of prospecting ads, right? But so would be in that example. Same thing would be, for example, if the search term of best tennis rackets for serving harder, for example. That's also prospecting. I wouldn't show up there unless I pay for that term, right? Or maybe I have a great organic position and I'm there, but if not, I would have to pay for that term anyway. So I think that obviously prospecting is crucial. It can make or break something. I think mid-market in particular, or also enterprise, but the bottom funnel prospecting, which is usually paid search, because I always say paid search is like reading the mind of people, right? If somebody's searching for the best tennis racket for serve, they're buying a tennis racket, right? Because yeah, I can say, yeah, no, I want to target young people between 20 and 35 because that's what tennis players tend to be, and I can target high like affluent zip codes, and I can target interest in sports and interest in tennis and all of that. But for example, I play tennis. I love tennis. I haven't bought a racket in 2 years. I'm not planning to buy one in the next 2 years because I have my two rackets that I already bought, right? So they can target me all day long. I don't have the intent, right? So I think brands know that, and again, bottom funnel is saturated. I think now what can make or break your brand, and you have to be there, you have to exhaust bottom funnel. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but you cannot spend all of your budget in bottom funnel because ultimately there's more opportunity if you do it right to come a little bit higher up in the funnel, right? So what I'm saying is, yeah, if you put out great content about, for example, why certain like education, but not too top funnel, especially now with AI, but from a prospecting aspect, if you can start to get to those folks when they are more in the middle of the funnel, if you can create videos that they can then now start seeing you and trusting you. This is very common also in B2B. It's very corporate. So, when there's a face behind the brand and it's a face that, sends a message that resonates, that can also create a big difference versus the other brands. So I think it's crucial. And that I'm really talking about paid social. So whether that's LinkedIn or Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, without getting into, for example, they're much more Reddit and programmatic and Hulu and connected TV, right? There's other ways, but let's keep it simple and say it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can, with the right message, and now there are technologies that allow you to do B2B targeting, not only on LinkedIn, but also on channels like Facebook. They're not as exact as LinkedIn, who has the data themselves of that. They're getting better. And just to give you an idea, the cost of LinkedIn could be 10 times higher than some of these other channels, or at least 5 times higher, right? So if you can start doing LinkedIn targeting in these other platforms, you have much better chance of a good ROI there, right? But again, you need to know what to say and to whom, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're talking about sort of an ABM approach on non-LinkedIn platforms.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm curious for the absolute top of the funnel where people are starting to migrate to LLM. How or have you ever used like review sites as a method for optimizing LLMs? Because I've noticed that a lot of the time LLMs will reference like, and maybe review is not the best way to put it, but like ranking sites where they say top 10 companies in this industry. I is there a way to like purchase or somehow sponsor those lists to improve your rankings? Is that a lever that businesses can pull?
I think you have to do it, or more than buying, it's like pushing your customers to create reviews. I don't think you can necessarily buy or fake it. I think, for example, Clutch, in the case of for software, it's a big one. That, yeah, I agree with what you said. I think that's definitely the case. I think LLMs are looking to those review sites as an unbiased source of information for when people are comparing brands, tools, softwares, etc. Obviously, if they are comparing, again, keep continuing with the example, if you go to the website of Wilson, they're going to say they're the best racket. But if they're going to the Tennis Warehouse reviews, where people are saying, I really like this Wilson racket because of the control, but I'm old and I have elbow problems, so for me it didn't work out great. So I had to switch to Babolat Pure Drive because this one was more forgiving, etc. Now, ChatGPT is going to look at that review, knowing that it's not the brand and knowing it's a non-biased party, and they're going to give it much more weight than the copy in the Wilson.com website that says this is Federer's racket, is the best racket in the history of tennis. And you can definitely see that right now that ChatGPT starts giving, or they started a few months ago that they start giving you the source links. Most of them, or the majority of them, are to review sites. Just like this, obviously, when you're going to ask for comparisons between brands, right? They will give you links, usually give you links to those sites as opposed to give you a link to each of the brand claiming that, right? Like they're smart enough to recognize that.
Yeah. When, just out of curiosity, I want to know your prediction of when you think we'll have paid advertising available in the LLM search results.
In Google, you already have for the AI summaries. The thing is, it's not, you cannot control it. It just started. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not how perhaps I had in mind that it would work someday, and I think it's how people have in mind, which is, okay, when you're asking what's the best tennis racket, essentially have a small line there that says add Wilson rackets. I don't know if OpenAI is going to get there or is going to go up. Maybe they will. A lot of people think it's a matter of time. I don't know. If they charge you already $20 a month or 100 or 200 in the corporate plans, if I'm paying, definitely, okay, maybe $20 is maybe, but if I'm paying $100, $200 for a plan, don't show me ads. It's the same thing with Netflix, etc. So now the free version or the $20 version, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but I think it's plausible that next year something will come up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's it's going to be a different nature, right? We have to see. For example, now that the ads came out in Google iSummary, we as an agency were really interested in how that, at least now, they don't let you say, okay, I want to spend more to be there, or I don't want to be there, take me out of those summaries. Like, you have no control, and they don't tell you when they're showing, or if they're showing, or how they're showing, or to what. It's very still a black box, but obviously that will evolve. But yeah, everybody will keep an eye on that. But honestly, I wish I knew, but I don't.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think brand safety, it will be a big concern with AI advertising. I think the AI companies are going to want to do it as fast as they can, and I think small businesses will adopt it right away. But it seems like because it's a sort of probabilistic output, you don't really know exactly when it's going to show your brand or for what, or what the context around the conversation is. And it's a little bit different than Google search, in the sense that with Google search, you don't have a like summary that is going to change every time. Obviously, with the AI, it does, but traditional Google search, you just have a list of companies. So it's pretty easy to control the output, or like where you're advertising or what keywords need to be searched. But with the AI summary, it could be something that's harmful to the brand, and the brand still pays to advertise on it. It's just harder to control that. So I'm very curious how that works. Given that, I think next year is a reasonable expectation for it to come out, but I think it'll be a little bit longer before the larger companies start to use it.
Yeah, and I think mainly Google. Well, I guess AI is both have an interesting decision to make. AI, OpenAI, in the case of okay, do we want to go that route? Do we want to model this with ads? And how would they do that? Right? If I ask, what are the best tennis rackets? They're gonna just show like a banner of a Wilson racket there, or how exactly would work out? Would that piss people off or not? And then Google has a different problem, which is they are well aware that with AI and with ChatGPT, traffic was going down from them, and that was less revenue for them because less clicks is less revenue. So we need to adapt on this. So they put the Google AI summaries, which takes even more traffic out of Google because people find answers there, but they know they had no option because otherwise people would stop using Google entirely. But then their current revenue is coming from those clicks, so they're telling brands, no, don't worry, this is not disappearing that much. But at the same time, it's okay, but also you can appear in the AI summaries. We just don't know how exactly, but yeah, put your money and we'll show you when we think. So it's all evolving, and they're in a tough position, and you as a brand, you have to understand their interest. And for example, now the thing is, you cannot prevent your budget from appearing in AI summaries, but you definitely cannot count on AI summaries as being an ROI positive tactic right now. Yeah, actually, you have to see it as right now it's a loss. It's something that if we want to continue to do Google Ads, because you cannot measure it, you cannot control it, so then you cannot count on it, because the whole point is that you measure things for when it works, you scale it, or at least you know the ROI that you will get. But with Google, with the AI, some is tough. But yeah, so yeah, it's just a matter of, I think all we can do is just keep an eye on it, measure what we can, and pivot quickly, be very agile with the changes. And yeah, if OpenAI comes out with ads, definitely let's try them, right? Whether you agree with that or not, or you would like to see ads or not, you as a marketing director or owner, you need to go and try it and see how they work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's an appropriate time for me to mention that I built a tool that does have GEO capabilities where, at least from an analytics perspective, where it captures how all the different AIs will rank your business and what they're saying about your business in terms of strengths and weaknesses, and just gives direction for what kind of content to produce to gently nudge the AIs to basically frame your business in a stronger way. Yeah, take a look at searchmaster.app. I'll put a link in the description. But yeah, I think that it is definitely an important thing to keep tabs on. If you look at the traffic sources for where your content is or where your traffic is coming from, it's increasingly from these LLMs. So yeah, it's exciting to see how the search market is shifting.
Yeah, and even if they don't send you traffic, they are definitely influencing folks. So you want to know what they're saying about you.
Yeah. Awesome. Carlos, any last thoughts before we go?
No, man, I think we covered everything. I think going back to B2B, I think it's really important, again, to live in the CRM. That's something that is missed. Going back to the start of your question or not the question, but the conversation of starting in sports, sabermetrics, people would go from home runs and average to the most important metrics, and that shifted to wins above replacement, or OPS, let's say, and then eventually wins above replacement. I think the same thing in marketing is happening. People need to go from clicks and conversions and move into the metrics that the CRM is providing. So I think my message is for B2B marketers that to measure things in the CRM in cost per qualified opportunity or for client acquired, and start there. Whether that's making decisions about GEO, SEO, is okay, your current efforts, how much qualified opportunities are giving you, what keyword, what campaign, what tactic, and go from there. But yeah, other than that, no, man, great conversation, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon.